The alien world stretched out before Lieutenant Orion Gray like a nightmare painted in shades of crimson and obsidian. The air shimmered with an unnatural heat, making the horizon waver as if mocking his human senses. Around him, the remnants of Earth's finest soldiers trudged through the alien terrain, their boots crunching against crystalline formations that glowed faintly under the twin suns. Orion adjusted his helmet, the weight of it pressing down on him more from exhaustion than its physical mass. They had been sent to this hostile planet, codenamed Iithra, to retrieve something called the Nexus core, a device rumored to hold unimaginable power. What started as a straightforward mission had spiraled into chaos when they encountered the hive mind's ruler, Queen Zorus. She was not just any adversary. She was intelligent, calculating, and utterly ruthless. Her towering form loomed over them during their first encounter, her segmented exoskeleton gleaming like polished steel, mandibles clicking softly as though savoring their fear. Orion glanced at Corporal Mira Callan, who walked beside him. Her sharp green eyes scanned their surroundings constantly, rifle ready but trembling slightly in her grip. He knew she hated being here almost as much as he did. Their third companion, Sergeant Theo Voss, brought up the rear, his bulky frame dwarfing both of them. Voss muttered curses under his breath every few minutes, each syllable dripping with frustration. "Keep moving," Orion said, his voice low but firm. "We don't have time for breaks." Mira shot him a glare. "Easy for you to say, boss. You're not carrying half the gear we are." Voss snorted. "Speak for yourself, rookie. I'm lugging most of it." Orion ignored their bickering. They were all tired, hungry, and scared, not that anyone would admit it aloud, but focusing on petty grievances wouldn't get them closer to escaping this hellhole. The thought of returning empty-handed made his stomach churn. Failure wasn't an option. Not after everything they'd lost already. As they pressed forward, the landscape grew stranger. Towering spires of black stone jutted out of the ground like jagged teeth, some pulsating faintly with veins of bioluminescent light. The air smelled metallic, sharp enough to sting the back of his throat. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the planet itself conspired against them. Then came the whispers. At first, Orion thought it was just the wind weaving through the alien structures. But the sound grew louder, more distinct, a chorus of voices speaking in languages he couldn't understand, overlapping one another until they became a cacophony. It set his nerves on edge, raising goosebumps along his arms despite the oppressive heat. "Do you hear that?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Voss tightened his grip on his weapon. "Yeah. And I don't like it." Orion didn't respond. His mind raced, trying to piece together what could be causing the noise. Was it another trap? A new tactic by Zorus to unnerve them further? Or worse, was it some kind of psychic attack? He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. Whatever it was, panicking wouldn't help. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. That something, or someone, was watching them. Queen Zorus materialized before them so suddenly that even Orion flinched. One moment the path ahead was clear, and the next, her massive form blocked their way, her claws clicking rhythmically against the crystalline ground. Her multifaceted eyes glimmered with an unsettling intelligence, and her elongated body seemed to ripple with energy. Orion instinctively raised his rifle, but he hesitated, knowing full well how futile it would be against her impenetrable carapace. "Well, humans," Zorus began, her voice resonating deep within their minds rather than their ears, "you've proven remarkably persistent. Few species dare trespass so boldly into my domain." Theo Voss growled under his breath, his finger twitching near the trigger. "If you think we're backing down now, Ladybug, you've got another thing coming." Zorus tilted her head, her mandibles spreading into what might have been a grin. "Ladybug? How quaint. Your primitive insults are almost endearing." She turned her gaze toward Mira, who stood frozen, her rifle aimed but shaking. "And you, child of Earth, your heart races like a frightened bird. Do you fear me?" Mira swallowed hard but held her ground. "Fear doesn't stop us from doing what needs to be done." A low chuckle echoed in their minds. Brave words. But bravery is often born of ignorance, isn't it? Zorus shifted her attention to Orion, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You lead these insects, don't you? Tell me, little soldier, do you truly believe your fragile bodies can withstand the wrath of my kind?" Orion gritted his teeth, refusing to let her rattle him. "We didn't come here looking for a fight. We came for the Nexus core. Hand it over, and we'll leave without causing any more trouble." Zorus let out a sound that might have been laughter, though it carried no warmth. "Ah yes, the Nexus core. Such arrogance, thinking you could simply take it. Did you really imagine I would allow such a treasure to fall into your clumsy hands?" Before Orion could respond, a wave of pressure slammed into his mind, forcing him to his knees. It wasn't physical pain, it was far worse. Memories surged unbidden to the surface, ones he'd buried long ago. The faces of his fallen comrades, the screams of dying innocence, the crushing weight of failure. He clenched his fists, struggling to push back against the intrusion, but it was relentless. "You think you can hide your thoughts from me?" Zorus purred, her voice dripping with mockery. "How amusing. Shall I show you what lies beneath your bravado?" And then it happened. In a moment of sheer frustration, Orion's internal monologue slipped past his defenses. "Blah blah, stop yapping," he thought bitterly, unaware that Zorus could hear every word. As soon as the thought registered, her demeanor shifted. The playful menace vanished, replaced by something colder, darker. Her mandibles snapped shut, and her tail whipped around, the stinger poised dangerously close to Orion's chest. "Did you just—" Her voice trailed off, disbelief mingling with fury. "You dare insult me in your own mind?" Orion froze, his blood running cold. He hadn't meant for her to hear that. Hell, he hadn't even realized she could hear it. Now, staring up at her towering form, he understood the gravity of his mistake. Guys," Mira whispered urgently, lowering her rifle ever so slightly. "I think we messed up." "No kidding," Voss muttered, his usual bravado faltering. "Any bright ideas, boss?" Orion opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For once, his quick wit failed him. All he could do was stare at Zorus, whose glowing eyes promised retribution far worse than death. Time seemed to slow as Zorus loomed over Orion, her tail swaying menacingly. The lieutenant scrambled to his feet, his mind racing for a way out of this disaster. "Wait," he blurted, holding up both hands in a gesture of surrender. "It was just a slip. An accident." The Queen's mandibles clicked sharply, the sound echoing like a judge's gavel slamming down. "An accident?" she repeated, her tone dripping with venom. "You presume to call your insolence an accident? Do you know what happens to those who offend me?" Mira stepped forward cautiously, her rifle lowered but still gripped tightly. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "He didn't mean it. Humans, they talk too much sometimes. Their thoughts spill out before they realize it. Please, spare him. We need him to complete our mission." Zorus turned her piercing gaze toward Mira, her multifaceted eyes glinting ominously. "Spare him? Why should I? This creature has shown me nothing but disrespect. And yet you plead for mercy? How curious." Voss moved closer to Orion, positioning himself between the lieutenant and the alien queen. His bulky frame might not stand a chance against her, but it was clear he wasn't about to back down. "Look, your highness or whatever," he said, his voice gruff but tinged with forced politeness. "We're all stressed here. Long journey, bad food, no showers. You know how it is. Cut the guy some slack, all right." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Zorus studied them, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she threw her head back and emitted a sound that resembled laughter, but it was anything but comforting. It was sharp, grating, and filled with malice. "You amuse me, humans. Perhaps there is hope for your species yet." Orion exchanged a glance with Mira and Voss, unsure whether to feel relieved or even more terrified. Zorus lowered her tail, though her claws remained poised as if ready to strike at any moment. "Very well," she said finally, her voice smooth but laced with warning. "I will grant you this reprieve, for now. But know this, your insolence has consequences." She took a deliberate step forward, her massive frame casting a shadow over the trio. "The Nexus core you seek is not merely a prize to be taken. It is bound to me, part of my essence. To claim it, you must prove yourselves worthy, or die trying." Orion swallowed hard, his mind racing. "What do you mean, prove ourselves?" Zorus smirked, her mandibles spreading wide. "Survive my trials. Face the challenges I set before you, and perhaps I shall reconsider allowing you to leave with your lives intact. Fail, and you will become one with my hive." Mira tightened her grip on her rifle, her knuckles white. "Trials? What kind of trials?" The Queen chuckled again, the sound sending shivers down Orion's spine. "Oh, you'll see soon enough. Follow me, and pray your feeble minds can endure what comes next." With that, Zorus turned and began moving deeper into the alien landscape, her movements fluid and eerily silent. The trio hesitated for a heartbeat before following, their footsteps crunching against the crystalline ground. None of them dared to speak, the weight of their predicament pressing down on them like a suffocating fog. As they ventured further, the environment shifted dramatically. The jagged spires gave way to sprawling tunnels carved into the earth, their walls pulsating faintly with an eerie blue light. Strange symbols etched into the surfaces glowed intermittently, casting flickering shadows that danced unervingly across the group's path. The air grew thicker, carrying a faint hum that vibrated through their bones. "This place feels alive," Mira murmured, her voice barely audible. She reached out tentatively to touch one of the glowing symbols, only to jerk her hand back when it pulsed brighter under her fingertips. "Don't touch anything," Orion warned sharply, though his own unease was evident in the tension lining his face. He kept his rifle trained ahead, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on him, amplifying every creak, every distant echo. Somewhere in the depths of the tunnel, a low rumble reverberated, growing louder with each passing second. "What the hell is that?" Voss growled, spinning around to cover their rear. His bulk filled the narrow passage, making retreat seem impossible. Before anyone could answer, the source of the noise revealed itself. From the shadows emerged creatures unlike anything they had encountered before. They scuttled forward on spindly legs, their bodies covered in chitinous armor that reflected the dim light. Rows of razor-sharp teeth lined their maws, and their multiple eyes glowed with predatory hunger. There were at least a dozen of them, closing in rapidly. "Stay sharp," Orion barked, raising his weapon. "Fire only if necessary. We don't know what else might be lurking here." The creatures circled them cautiously, their movements jerky and erratic. One lunged suddenly, its claws slicing through the air where Mira had been standing moments earlier. She rolled to the side, firing a controlled burst from her rifle that struck the creature squarely in its thorax. It screeched in agony, collapsing into a twitching heap. "Damn it, they're fast!" Voss shouted, swinging his rifle to take aim at another attacker. Bullets ricocheted harmlessly off its armored shell, forcing him to dodge as it leaped toward him. He swung his weapon like a club, smashing it into the creature's head with a sickening crack. It fell limp, but two more took its place instantly. Orion fired methodically, conserving ammunition while targeting weak points he hoped existed. Each kill bought them precious seconds, but the horde showed no signs of thinning. Sweat dripped down his brow as adrenaline coursed through his veins, sharpening his focus. He noticed Mira reloading her rifle with trembling hands, her breaths coming in ragged gasps. "We can't keep this up forever," she yelled over the cacophony of gunfire and shrieks. "There's too many of them." Voss grunted as he kicked one of the creatures away, its claws scraping against his armor. "Got any bright ideas, genius?" Orion's mind raced. They needed a way out, but the tunnel offered no obvious escape routes. Then he spotted something, a faint glimmer of light emanating from a crack high above them. If they could reach it, maybe they could climb to safety. "Up there!" he shouted, pointing toward the opening. "Cover me while I check it out." Without waiting for a response, he sprinted toward the wall, using protruding rocks and roots as handholds. The creatures swarmed below, snapping at his boots as he ascended. Reaching the crack, he peered inside and saw a narrow ledge leading upward. It wasn't much, but it was their best chance. "It's clear," he called down to the others. "Get up here." Mira holstered her rifle and followed, her smaller frame allowing her to scale the wall quickly. Voss brought up the rear, fending off the creatures with brute force until he reached the base of the climb. Together, they hauled themselves onto the ledge, pausing briefly to catch their breath. "Think they'll follow us?" Mira asked, glancing nervously at the writhing mass below. "They'll try," Orion replied grimly. "But we've got the high ground now. Let's move before they figure out how to reach us." They pressed onward, the ledge winding higher into the alien labyrinth. Behind them, the screeches of the creatures faded into the distance, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow worse. Every step felt heavier, the oppressive aura of the tunnels gnawing at their resolve. "I hate this place," Voss muttered, breaking the quiet. "Feels like it's alive and watching us." Orion nodded, though his attention remained fixed ahead. "Stay alert. We're not out of this yet." Unbeknownst to them, Queen Zorus observed their progress from the shadows, her multifaceted eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The trials had only just begun. The ledge led them to a cavernous chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood an enormous obelisk, its surface etched with the same glowing symbols that adorned the tunnel walls. The air hummed with energy, vibrating through their bodies and making their skin prickle. Orion stepped cautiously toward the structure, his rifle at the ready. "What is this thing?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She circled the obelisk warily, her eyes darting between the symbols and the dark recesses of the chamber. Orion shook his head. "No idea. But it's definitely not natural." He reached out to touch the surface, hesitating inches away. The symbols pulsed brighter, reacting to his proximity. "Careful," Voss warned, his voice tense. "Last thing we need is to set off another trap." Before Orion could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Cracks spiderwebbed across the floor, glowing with the same eerie blue light as the obelisk. From the fissures emerged tendrils of what looked like liquid metal, writhing and twisting as they rose into the air. The tendrils coalesced into humanoid shapes, their forms shifting and reforming until they solidified into figures that bore a grotesque resemblance to humans. "These things look wrong," Mira whispered, her rifle trained on the nearest figure. Its face was featureless save for a single unblinking eye in the center of its forehead. Its limbs ended in sharp, blade-like appendages that glinted menacingly in the dim light. "Wrong doesn't even begin to cover it," Voss muttered, raising his weapon. "What do we do now, boss?" Orion's mind raced. The creatures hadn't attacked yet, but their presence was unmistakably hostile. "Stay calm," he said, his voice steady despite the knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "Let's see what they want." As if in response, the figures began to move, circling the trio with deliberate slowness. Their movements were unnervingly synchronized, as though controlled by a single mind. One of them extended an arm, pointing directly at Orion. The gesture was unmistakable. "They're after you," Mira said, her voice tight with urgency. "Why?" Orion clenched his jaw. "Probably because I pissed off their queen." The figure lunged suddenly, its blade arm slicing through the air where Orion had been standing moments earlier. He stumbled backward, barely avoiding the strike. Mira opened fire, her bullets ricocheting harmlessly off the creature's metallic skin. Voss charged forward, swinging his rifle like a battering ram, but the figure sidestepped effortlessly, countering with a swift slash that left a shallow gash across his arm. "Damn it!" Voss roared, clutching the wound. "These bastards are tough." Orion ducked under another swipe, his mind racing for a solution. The obelisk pulsed brighter, its glow intensifying with each passing second. "Focus on the obelisk," he shouted. "It's controlling them." Mira hesitated, torn between defending herself and following Orion's orders. Another figure lunged at her, forcing her to dive out of the way. "How do we stop it?" she yelled back. "Destroy it," Orion replied, dodging another attack. He grabbed a fragmentation grenade from his belt and hurled it at the base of the obelisk. The explosion sent shards of glowing crystal flying, but the structure remained intact, its light flickering erratically. The figures paused, their movements becoming disjointed and erratic. For a brief moment, it seemed the attack had worked. Then, with a deafening roar, the obelisk erupted in a surge of energy. The tendrils reformed, larger and more menacing than before, their blades gleaming with renewed malice. Plan B. Voss grunted, parrying a strike with the stock of his rifle. Orion's eyes darted around the chamber, searching for anything they could use to their advantage. His gaze landed on a cluster of crystalline formations near the far wall. They pulsed faintly, their glow matching the frequency of the obelisk's energy. "Over there!" he shouted, pointing. "Shoot those crystals!" Mira didn't hesitate. She fired a concentrated burst at the formations, shattering them in a cascade of sparks. The obelisk shuddered, its light dimming significantly. The figures staggered, their forms destabilizing as the energy sustaining them waned. "Again," Orion urged, tossing another grenade toward the remaining crystals. The explosion tore through the chamber, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. The obelisk collapsed into a heap of inert rubble, and the figures dissolved into pools of liquid metal that evaporated into nothingness. For a moment, silence reigned. The trio stood panting, their bodies battered but alive. Mira slumped against a wall, her rifle dangling loosely from her fingers. That was insane. Voss wiped sweat from his brow, wincing as he inspected the gash on his arm. "Tell me about it. What the hell were those things?" Orion didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the remnants of the obelisk, his mind replaying the events of the past few minutes. "Projections," he said finally. "Manifestations of Zorus' power. She's testing us, to see if we're capable of adapting, of finding solutions under pressure." Mira frowned. "So what? Every trial gets harder from here on out." "Probably," Orion replied grimly. "Which means we need to stay sharp. Whatever comes next, we can't afford to make mistakes." As if on cue, the ground quaked again, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber. "Impressive," Zorus' voice purred in their minds. "You've survived the second trial. But the true test awaits." From the shadows emerged a massive doorway, its surface adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and writhe as they watched. Beyond it lay darkness, impenetrable and foreboding. "Guess we're going in," Voss muttered, hefting his rifle. "Lead the way, boss." Orion took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever horrors lay ahead. With a nod, he stepped through the doorway, Mira and Voss close behind. The trials were far from over, and the cost of failure loomed larger with each step they took. The doorway led them into a vast, cavernous expanse that defied comprehension. The space stretched endlessly in all directions, its boundaries lost in an infinite haze of swirling colors, deep purples, fiery oranges, and shimmering golds. The ground beneath their feet felt solid enough, but it pulsed faintly with the same bioluminescent energy they had encountered throughout Iithra. Above them, there was no ceiling, only a churning void that seemed alive, as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. "This place gives me the creeps," Voss muttered, his voice unusually subdued. He adjusted his grip on his rifle, scanning the horizon for threats. "Feels like we're walking through someone's nightmare." Mira nodded absently, her wide eyes darting around. "It's not just a place, it's sentient. Like it knows we're here." Orion didn't respond immediately. His gaze was fixed ahead, where a narrow bridge materialized from the ether, stretching across the abyss toward a distant platform. Atop the platform stood what appeared to be a throne carved from obsidian, its edges jagged and sharp like broken glass. Seated upon it was Queen Zorus herself, her massive form radiating power and menace. Her multifaceted eyes locked onto them, gleaming with anticipation. "Welcome to my sanctum," she said, her voice resonating within their minds rather than their ears. It was both beautiful and terrifying, carrying a weight that pressed down on their chests. "You have proven yourselves resourceful, if nothing else. But now comes the final trial, the one that will determine whether you are worthy of leaving this world alive. Orion stepped forward cautiously, his boots clicking softly against the pulsating surface of the bridge. "What do you want from us?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the unease coiling in his gut. "We've fought your creatures, solved your puzzles, and survived your traps. Isn't that proof enough?" Zorus tilted her head slightly, her mandibles spreading into something resembling a smirk. "Survival is merely the first step, little soldier. True worthiness requires sacrifice." Before any of them could react, the air around them shimmered, and 3 figures emerged from the haze, one standing beside each of them. They were humanoid in shape, but their features were indistinct, their forms shifting constantly as if caught between states of existence. Their eyes, however, burned with clarity, piercing through the trio's defenses. "These are echoes of your past selves," Zorus explained, her tone almost melodic. "They represent the choices you made, the lives you left behind. To pass this trial, you must confront them, and decide whether to embrace or reject them." Orion turned slowly to face his echo. The figure before him bore a striking resemblance to himself, though younger and unscarred by battle. Its expression was calm, almost serene, but its eyes held a depth of sorrow that made Orion's chest tighten. Memories surged unbidden to the surface. Memories of home, of loved ones he'd abandoned, of promises broken in pursuit of duty. "You ran away," the echo said softly, its voice tinged with sadness. "You told yourself it was for the greater good, but deep down, you knew it was fear. Fear of failure. Fear of being ordinary." Orion clenched his fists, fighting the urge to look away. "I did what I had to do. There was no other choice." "There's always a choice," the echo countered, taking a step closer. "But running has become easier than facing the truth. Will you continue to hide behind excuses, or will you finally take responsibility for who you are?" Orion's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to deny the accusations, but the words caught in his throat. Deep down, he knew the echo spoke the truth. For years, he'd buried his guilt under layers of discipline and duty, convincing himself that personal sacrifices were necessary. Now, confronted with the ghost of his former self, he couldn't ignore the ache of regret gnawing at his soul. Nearby, Mira faced her own echo, a frail, shadowy version of herself clutching a small wooden box. Tears streamed down its cheeks as it whispered brokenly, "You promised you'd protect them. You swore you wouldn't let anyone else die. But how many bodies lie in your wake? How many more will fall because of you?" Myra's hands trembled as she stared at the figure. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The weight of her failures pressed down on her, suffocating her. Every mission gone wrong, every ally lost, it all came rushing back, overwhelming her with guilt and shame. Voss, meanwhile, squared off against an echo clad in civilian clothing, holding the hand of a young child. The figure's voice was gentle yet accusatory. "You left them behind when you joined the military. You told yourself it was for the best, but deep down, you knew it was selfish. You wanted glory, adventure, a way out of your mundane life. And now, look where it's gotten you." Voss scowled, his usual bravado crumbling under the weight of the echo's words. "I didn't have a choice," he snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. "My family, they would have been better off without me dragging them down." "Would they?" the echo replied, tilting its head. "Or was that just an excuse to chase your dreams without consequences?" Queen Zorus watched the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. "Your echoes embody the burdens you carry, the regrets, the doubts, the fears. To move forward, you must reconcile with them. Embrace their truths, or cast them aside forever. The decision is yours." Orion took a deep breath, forcing himself to meet his echo's gaze. "You're right," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been running for too long. But I can't change the past. All I can do is choose how I face the future." The echo studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Face your fears, and perhaps you may find redemption." With that, it dissolved into a cascade of golden light, leaving Orion feeling lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Encouraged by Orion's resolve, Mira turned back to her echo. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was firm. I failed them, I won't deny that. But I'm still here. I can still make things right. I owe it to them to keep fighting, even if I stumble along the way. Her echo smiled faintly before fading away, leaving behind a lingering sense of peace. Mira wiped her tears, her posture straightening as newfound determination replaced her despair. Voss hesitated longer than the others, staring at his echo with conflicted emotions. Finally, he sighed and shook his head. Maybe I did leave for selfish reasons, he admitted gruffly. But I'm not the same person I was back then. I've grown, changed, for better or worse. If I go back, it'll only remind me of what I lost. And maybe that's okay. His echo regarded him silently for a moment before nodding. It released the child's hand and stepped backward, dissolving into silver mist. Voss exhaled heavily, rubbing the back of his neck as though unsure what to do with the sudden clarity. When the echoes vanished, the cavern fell silent. Zorus rose from her throne, her towering form casting a long shadow over the trio. You have faced your inner demons and emerged stronger for it, she said, her voice tinged with approval. Few possess the courage to confront their flaws so openly. Perhaps there is hope for humanity after all. Orion exchanged glances with Mira and Voss, relief washing over him. They had endured the trials, survived the Queen's tests, but something told him this wasn't the end. Not yet. What now? He asked, turning his attention back to Zorus. Do we get the Nexus core? Or is there another challenge waiting for us? The Queen's mandibles spread into a predatory grin. Oh, there is always another challenge, little soldier. But rest assured, the hardest part lies ahead. Are you prepared to face the ultimate test? Before Orion could respond, the ground beneath them began to shift. The obsidian platform cracked and splintered, revealing a spiraling staircase descending into darkness. A cold wind swept through the chamber, carrying whispers that sent shivers down their spines. Follow the path, Zorus instructed, her voice echoing as she faded into the haze. And discover the true cost of your ambitions. Without hesitation, Orion led the way down the staircase, Mira and Voss close behind. Each step took them deeper into the unknown, their hearts pounding with a mixture of dread and resolve. Whatever awaited them below, they were ready, or so they hoped. The staircase spiraled downward endlessly, each step resonating with a dull thud that echoed through the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder as they descended, biting at their skin and making their breaths visible in ghostly puffs. Orion led the way, his rifle raised but useless against whatever awaited them below. Mira followed closely, her eyes darting nervously into the shadows while Voss brought up the rear, muttering under his breath about how much he hated stairs. Finally, the staircase opened into a vast chamber bathed in an ethereal glow. At its center floated the Nexus core, a pulsating orb of crystalline energy suspended above a pedestal carved from black stone. Its light shimmered in intricate patterns, casting dancing reflections across the walls. The sight was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, but there was something unsettling about it too. It wasn't just an object, it felt alive, aware, watching them with an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. Well, this is it, Orion said, his voice steady despite the knot of anticipation tightening in his chest. Let's grab it and get out of here. But before any of them could move, a deep rumble shook the chamber. From the shadows emerged Queen Zorus once more, her massive form radiating power and menace. Her multifaceted eyes glimmered with a mix of curiosity and amusement as she regarded the trio. You've come so far, she purred, her voice resonating within their minds. But taking the Nexus core isn't merely a matter of reaching for it. To claim it, you must prove yourselves not just physically or mentally, but spiritually. Orion frowned, lowering his rifle slightly. What does that mean? Another trial. Zorus chuckled, the sound echoing like distant thunder. Indeed. This final test requires unity, trust in one another, faith in your shared purpose. Only then will the Nexus core accept you. Mira exchanged a glance with Orion, uncertainty flickering in her green eyes. Unity? How are we supposed to show that? Voss crossed his arms over his broad chest, scowling. This is ridiculous. We've been through hell together already. Doesn't that count for something? It counts, Zorus replied smoothly. But trust goes deeper than surviving trials side by side. It means putting aside doubts, fears, and selfish desires, for the greater good. She gestured toward the Nexus core with one clawed appendage. Touch it together. If your bond is strong enough, it will yield to you. If not... She let the sentence trail off ominously. Orion hesitated, looking between Mira and Voss. They had faced unimaginable horrors, confronted their deepest regrets, and fought tooth and nail to survive. But now, standing on the precipice of success, doubt crept in. Could they truly trust one another completely? Were they willing to risk everything? Not just for themselves, but for humanity? We can do this, Mira said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but resolute. We've made it this far because of each other. Because we believed in each other. She stepped forward, extending a hand toward Orion. Right. Orion nodded slowly, feeling a surge of determination wash over him. Whatever fears lingered were overshadowed by the undeniable truth. They were stronger together. He clasped Myra's hand firmly, then turned to Voss. You with us, big guy? Voss grunted, rolling his shoulders before stepping forward. If I say no, you'll probably leave me behind anyway. Fine, let's do this. Together, the three of them approached the Nexus core. Its glow intensified as they drew closer, bathing them in warm, golden light. When they reached the pedestal, they paused, exchanging one last glance before placing their free hands on the orb simultaneously. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a surge of energy coursed through them, blinding and overwhelming. Memories, emotions, and thoughts flooded their minds, not just their own, but those of their companions. Orion saw flashes of Myra's childhood, her dreams of becoming a soldier to protect others. He felt Voss's longing for family, his struggle to reconcile his past with his present. In turn, they experienced his guilt, his drive to make amends for failures he couldn't undo. It was terrifying and beautiful. Through the chaos, they found clarity. Their differences didn't divide them, they strengthened them. Together, they formed something greater than the sum of their parts. When the surge subsided, the Nexus core dimmed slightly, its glow softening to a gentle hum. A faint crackle of energy surrounded it, signaling its acceptance. You have passed, Zorus announced, her tone softer now, almost reverent. The Nexus core recognizes your unity, your willingness to sacrifice for one another. Take it, and fulfill your mission. Orion exhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. Thank you, he said, surprising even himself. Despite everything, he felt a strange sense of respect for the alien queen. She had pushed them to their limits, forcing them to confront truths they might otherwise have avoided. Zorus inclined her head slightly. Go now, humans. Prove that your species is worthy of such power. With careful reverence, Orion removed the Nexus core from its pedestal. It fit snugly in his hands, its warmth reassuring rather than threatening. Mira and Voss flanked him as they turned to leave, their steps lighter than they had been in days. The journey back to the surface was uneventful, almost peaceful. No creatures attacked, no traps hindered their progress. It was as if Iithra itself had acknowledged their triumph. By the time they reached their ship, the suns were setting, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. As they prepared for takeoff, Mira leaned back in her seat, letting out a long sigh. I never thought we'd actually make it. Me neither, Voss admitted, rubbing his temples. But hey, guess we proved the old ladybug wrong. Orion smiled faintly, cradling the Nexus core in his lap. We didn't just prove her wrong. We proved something to ourselves too. Mira grinned, nudging him playfully. So, what's next, boss? Saving the world again. Orion chuckled, leaning back in his chair. One step at a time, rookie. One step at a time. The engines roared to life, lifting the ship off the ground and carrying them away from Iithra. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, the stars stretched out before them like a canvas of infinite possibilities. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope burned brightly in their hearts. They had survived. They had succeeded. And though challenges undoubtedly lay ahead, they faced them together, as a team.